Number one, is crypto the future? Yes. Will crypto keep going up in the next 5 years? Yes. If you're holding crypto right now, is this a good time to sell? Maybe. How does this not contradict itself? Let me explain. Okay, so here it is. Tesla buying crypto is actually a great play for Tesla, obviously, because what happened here, as you just saw, they literally bought an asset that appreciated by 10% just out of the sheer reason that they purchased the asset. It's like, I call it the Cathy Wood effect, right? When you purchase an asset, like when Cathy Wood invests in a stock, it will automatically go up because everybody's, saying, well, if Cathy Wood just bought it, probably good stock, right? So it's the same thing when Elon Musk says, well, I'm buying 1.5 billion of Bitcoin. Obviously, the price goes up. So Tesla just made 10% on 10.5 on 1.5 billion. So it's literally they just made a shit ton of money just because they actually bought the thing, just out of like goodwill or whatever you want to call it, right? Reputation and whatnot. Now, what is the future of the currency system? Is a decentralized system for sure. You just saw it with GameStop, right? If we had our stocks running on the Bitcoin, like on the blockchain like system, we wouldn't have had a 2-day delay on these transactions to clear, and there wouldn't have been any risk associated. So we didn't have the stoppages that we had, right? The whole stoppages that happened with the brokerages and whatnot, they happened because of one reason, because there's a 2-day clearance period that you have to do when you're working on a cash basis, right? The banking system is archaic. If this thing ran on not Bitcoin, but if it ran on blockchain, we wouldn't have this whole mess, and this stoppage in trading on GameStop and AMC would have never happened. That's just one example. There's a lot of applications and utilizations of cryptocurrency and blockchain. I'm really not the best guy to talk about it. There's much smarter people than me that know so much more about it. So I definitely think it is the future. I have a lot of really smart friends who hold Bitcoin and are not selling, and they're up tens of thousands of percent, early investors. However, and here's the however. Now the real question you should be asking me, well, Tom, if that's the case, that means we should buy Bitcoin right now because Tesla just bought it. I mean, this is the future. For sure, in the next 5 years, it's going to go up, so we should buy now. Well, not necessarily, because cryptocurrencies in general tend to be extremely volatile. And it's almost like this effect as further as you go from Bitcoin, if you take a step towards Ethereum, and then you take another step towards Ripple and whatnot. I'm not an expert in all these coins, but the more you get into these fringe coins, the more volatile it becomes. But even Bitcoin, as you just saw, is extremely volatile. It can go 10% up, 10% down in a heartbeat, like this. So, because of the inherent volatility of Bitcoin, it's going to have a lot of speculation. A lot of people are going to get on this just to speculate, to make a quick buck. So you're going to see a lot of people utilizing the volatility to make quick money. They're not really interested as a long-term investment in Bitcoin. So you're going to have a lot of spikes up and down in Bitcoin because of this crazy volatility right now. So it's almost inevitable that we're going to see another dip. So I'm convinced that Bitcoin and all the other cryptos will dip once more. There's going to be another dip because there's going to be a massive sell-off of these massive gains that they just accumulated. So as far as when to get in, again, just my opinion, I probably would wait until the next dip because one will come because of the speculative nature of these coins. There's a lot of speculative money involved here. However, if you just want to say, hey, Tom, I don't care. This is my pension money, right? And you want to put it in today and take it out in 10 years, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it doesn't really matter. You can get in today, and in 10 years, you know this thing is going to be much, much more valuable than it is today. So it just depends on how much you want to manage this thing. If you want to manage it on a daily basis, probably a good idea to wait. But as a long-term investment, there's no doubt in my mind that in the next 5 years, we're headed towards $100,000 per Bitcoin. It's almost inevitable. You can't stop it. But the journey there is going to be extremely bumpy, and we might see Bitcoin dip to levels we haven't seen before. So it might be an extremely bumpy ride. So just my opinion is that definitely that's a must for your portfolio. But at 43,000, probably a good idea to wait for the next step and then get in. Again, it's just my opinion. This is not a professional. I'm definitely not an expert on Bitcoin. So let me take some chats because I've been ignoring you for the past few minutes. I'm going back on the chat to read you guys chats. Okay. Okay. Arazu says, Tom, I'm really torn. I was a real believer in Bitcoin early, but I exited last year when I was at $19,000. To me, it felt like it wasn't much of improvement in the last few years. Well, that's what happens when you speculate. That's the thing with that's exactly what I just said. If you think about it, I have a friend who I literally talked to today, this morning, and I called him up because I know he had a Bitcoin when it was worth around $200, and he sold it when the Bitcoin got to 500. So from 200 to 500, he sold it years ago, and he was convinced he did a really good deal because he literally doubled his money, right? He's of course kicking himself now, but for about a year, the price after he sold it at 500 went down to around 200. So for a whole year, he thought he made a great deal. What I'm saying is that when you look at Bitcoin, again, not an expert on Bitcoin, but when you look at Bitcoin, you got to have a broader perspective. You can't just look at it as in the same time frame you look at stocks because of the extreme volatility of these coins. And as further as you go from Bitcoin to Ethereum and Ripple and whatnot, it's even crazier. So you got to give it like at least a couple of years if you want to actually look at the coin and make some sort of a analysis. Hey Tom, what's your opinion on Ripple? Seems to have a lot more function than Bitcoin. Yeah, Ripple is more risk, more reward. I mean, there's more opportunities in Ripple, but again, Ripple I think is in the midst of a lawsuit or at least an investigation. So it's a risky play. It's a gamble. Is the market overvalued or is it just a consequence of close to zero interest rates? Great question, Sanjit, and let me explain. So the market is overvalued. Is this one of those tulip bubbles? No. It's overvalued because of two reasons. One of them is actually mentioned by Sanjit. It is the zero rate interest, because let me explain. If you guys have been following my DCFs, the main component in the DCF is the discount rate, right? The lower the discount rate is, the higher the valuation is. Obviously, if you understand the concept of how it works, right, in finance. So the lower the percentage that you're discounting from the future to the present, the higher the amount in the present the future represents. I hope that makes sense to you. In any case, the lower that percentage is, the higher the valuation of the company today is. And if the interest rates are zero, your your weighted average cost of capital, which is the discount rate, WACC, is pretty much close to zero. So if the WACC is close to zero, your discount rate is pretty much close to zero, meaning insane valuations. So yes, but there's another reason, Sanjit, that the market is extremely overvalued, and that's because there's literally so much cash in the system. The Fed is throwing liquidity at the market, buying junk bonds, throwing money, stimulus. There's so much cash that's being thrown into this fire to keep the fire going that people literally have a lot of cash on their hands, and that's also kind of driving the overvaluation. So it's not just the zero rate, but also the extreme liquidity, which is actually driving the market to this madness. But I mean, it's kind of a logical madness if you think about it. It's not completely detached from reality.